bold and brave, or cowardly and conforming? Bold and brave, or cowardly and conforming? You're listening to World Reading Club, presented by Hakeem Ali Bokus Alexander on Wisdom, Social Audio Inc., and Spreaker Social Podcasting, presented for World Reading Club in association with exercisingyourmind.com and UniquilibriuM. Are you bold and brave or cowardly and conforming? I don't even know what I'm about to read. I just know that I was in the bookstore, as I still am, and yesterday I met with Christopher Birkenbein, the scientist who is a project manager at NASA, specifically Armstrong Flight Research Center in California. And we met in Newport News because he's here in town in Virginia for a conference sessions that he's doing at Langley Air Force Base. We met for a couple hours, went to Tropical Smoothie, as I would always do, and then went to the bookstore. And I saw Aristotle's book called The Metaphysics, and we had a discussion about how it's not the metaphysics that most people think of, which basically are aliens and witches, that kind of stuff. Metaphysics, in Aristotle's definition, is more closely, or it's actually, because he's Greek, the definition of meta and physics, which just basically means beyond physics, so beyond anything physical. But beyond that, I found another book called How to Flourish by Aristotle, and I read only some brief section in it that inspired me to want to read, and I also just opened up the book again in the section called Virtue and Vice in Action, and I saw something. I read a few sentences, and I thought that I would start there and see where it leads. It felt like it was in line with some things that are my thought processes. You know, I've never been a fan of the band that I know of, because I couldn't name a single one of their songs, but I've always loved the name of the band, which is Corrosion of Conformity. And I wonder if this will address some of that. Also just came to mind the lyrics from another band that I am a huge fan of and have been for many years, was specifically Max Cavalera, who formed the Brazilian heavy metal band Sepultura with his brother and a few other guys. There's a line at the end of one of their songs on their album Chaos AD, which the song is called Refuse Resist, and the last line of the song says Chaos AD, disorders unleashed, starting to burn, starting to lynch. Silence means death. Stand on your feet. Inner fear, your worst enemy. Refuse, resist. So, anyway, this is in Aristotle's How to Flourish, those lyrics that before from Sepultura. But I'm going to just start. It's not even at the beginning of the section. I didn't feel like doing that. I just came to a point and I saw the word cowardly. Let's see what it has to say about here, because I think a lot of people might get a little stir out of this. Aristotle. People are cowardly or rash or brave in relation to the same kinds of challenge. The difference is in how they are disposed to respond. I'd like to stop there for a moment. Again, I'm going to do a lot of these breaks because that reminds me of something that I learned some time ago by listening to someone who you might know named Jim Rohn. He actually had a recording called Building Your Network Marketing Business with Jim Rohn, but besides the fact that it was about network marketing or multi-level marketing, and a lot of people think they're pyramid schemes, the interesting thing about it, he says that it's not what happens, it's what you do with what happens. It's not the blowing of the wind, it's the setting of the sails. The same wind blows on us all. So again, people are cowardly or rash or brave in relation to the same kinds of challenge. The difference is in how they are disposed to respond. The cowardly and the rash go too far and not far enough, while the brave strike a middle course and do as they should. They make their decision and endure because it is noble to do so, or shameful not to. Dying to escape from poverty, erotic passion, or something painful is a mark not of bravery but of cowardice. That's because it is softness to flee from painful difficulty, to flee something bad, rather than to bear the burden because it is noble to do so. While bravery is the sort of thing we have described, people also speak of other forms of bravery, which fall into 5 types. The primary type is that of citizens, since it is most like bravery. It seems citizen soldiers submit to dangers because of legal penalties and reproaches, and because they are rewarded with honor. That is why citizens appear to be bravest in cities where the cowardly are punished and the brave are rewarded. This sort of bravery is most similar to the one we discussed above, insofar as it comes from virtue. That's because it is due to a sense of shame, a desire for honor, a noble thing, and an aversion to reproach, a shameful thing. You might also classify as brave soldiers whose officers coerce them into facing dangers. But they are inferior insofar as they do not act from a sense of shame. They act from fear. What they seek to avoid is not disgrace, but pain. Commanders coerce their troops when, for example, they deliver a beating to anyone who retreats from their post, or when they station troops in front of a ditch or something like that. These are all cases of coercion. You should be brave, however, because it is noble, not because you have been coerced into it. Being experienced in a particular kind of danger also seems to be bravery, and on the battlefield, it is mercenaries who are experienced. There are many empty alarms in a battle, it seems, and these soldiers are best at recognizing them. So they appear brave when others don't know whether the alarm is real. Also, their experience makes them particularly good at doing their jobs without getting hurt, since they are adept at using their equipment and have the kind that is best for getting the job done without being injured. So they fight like armed men against the unarmed, or athletes against ordinary people. Mercenaries turn into cowards when the danger is extreme and they abandon their companies and their equipment. They are the first to flee, while citizen soldiers stand their ground and die. The citizens stand their ground because they think fleeing is shameful, and they prefer death to staying alive on those terms. Mercenaries, on the other hand, risk dangers at first when they think they hold the advantage, but flee when they realize they do not. They fear death more than dishonor. That is not what a brave person is like. Ferocity also gets confused with bravery. When people fight because they are enraged, like wounded animals launched at their attackers, they too appear brave, since a brave person does have a ferocious spirit. Nothing is readier to meet dangers than spirit. But brave people do what they do because it is noble, with their ferocious spirit helping them to do it. Those animals, by contrast, act from pain. They attack because they have been struck or are afraid. There is no bravery in rushing toward danger because you are driven by pains or by rage, with no thought of the perils ahead. Otherwise, hungry donkeys would be brave, since even a beating won't stop them from grazing. The bravery that is due to rage seems to be the most natural form, and if it also includes choice and purpose, it really is bravery. Also, people are pained when they are angry and get pleasure from exacting revenge. People who attack for these reasons are spoiling for a fight, but not brave. They do not fight because it is noble or because thinking tells them to do it. They fight because their passion is inflamed. Still, their condition is close to bravery. Soldiers who are confident of victory aren't brave either. They are bold in dangerous situations because they have won many victories and defeated many opponents in the past. They closely resemble the brave in that both types are emboldened, but the brave are emboldened for the reasons already mentioned, while these types are bold because they think they are stronger than their opponents and won't be harmed. When it turns out that this is not how things are for them, they flee. But to be brave, you must stand firm in the face of what really frightens you and would frighten anyone. And you must do so because it is noble to stand your ground and shameful not to. That is why it seems braver to be fearless and undisturbed in sudden alarms than when the danger is clear in advance. Your reaction is more from your disposition to the extent that it is not prepared in advance. When the danger can be foreseen, your choice might also be based on calculation and thinking, but when reacting on the spot, you act from your disposition. Soldiers who fight in ignorance also appear to be brave. They are not far removed from those who are confident of victory, but they are worse, in that soldiers confident of victory have something worthy about them, which is why they do hold ranks for a while. By contrast, mistaken fighters flee as soon as they realize that things are not as they had supposed. That is what happened when the Argives attacked the Spartans, thinking they were Sicyonians. We have now stated what sort of people are brave, and what sort only seem to be brave. So, I'm going to do a little backflipping here and go to the beginning of this section, which is 4, Virtue and Vice in Action, books 3, 4, and 5. The commentary at the beginning here says, Aristotle now embarks on a discussion of particular virtues and vices of character, which will occupy his attention through the end of Book 5. In each case, he identifies the mean and the extremes, and in keeping with his practical advice at the end of the Book 2, he often identifies the extreme that is more opposed to the mean, so that we can start out by seeking to avoid it. I didn't even understand that. I'm going to have to read that again, but not now. Matters of life and death. And where does it get to that part about bravery? Let's see. This starts at page 97, and the part that I started reading, it's 10 pages later on page 107. So I'm actually flipping back. I read from page 107 to, I think it was 117. So I read 10 pages, of the 20 it looks like that are in here. And now I'm going back to the first 10. So I read the second 10 of this part. I'm going back to the first 10 because I just wanted to read that about cowardly and brave. But now let's take a look here. It's matters of life and death. Let us now take up the virtues individually and identify each by its objects and its orientation toward them. First, let us discuss, there it goes, bravery. By now it is clear that bravery is an intermediate disposition in matters of fear and boldness. What we fear, evidently, are frightening things, and such things are, in a word, bad. That is why people define fear as expectation of something bad. But while all bad things are objects of fear, disrepute, poverty, disease, loneliness, death, we are not brave about all of them. That's because there are some things we should fear, and it is decent to fear them. For example, disgrace. You are decent and modest for fearing disgrace, and shameless if you don't. Perhaps we should not be afraid of poverty or disease, or in general what is not due to vice or self-inflicted. But fearlessness about these is not bravery either. People who are cowards on the battlefield may give freely to their friends and be quite bold about throwing away their money. And you are not a coward for being afraid that your child or wife will be assaulted, or brave if you are emboldened at the prospect of being whipped. So, which frightening things are the domain of bravery? Presumably the greatest ones, since no one endures more than the brave. The most frightening thing of all is death. But not death in every situation, it seems. For example, not at sea or from illness. So in which situations? Presumably in the noblest. Death in battle is of this sort. For the danger you face is both greatest and noblest. You are properly called brave for being unafraid to die a noble death when the risk of death is right at hand. Being in combat is especially like that. Nonetheless, a brave person will be fearless at sea and in illness, although not like seafarers who have given up all hope of safety and bemoan a death of this sort, or are confident of their safety as a result of experience. Brave action occurs in situations where you can fight back, or it would be noble to die, neither of which is the case for death at sea or from illness. Side note, noble above is a translation for kalon, which is Aristotle's term denoting the goodness specific to virtuous actions. It overlaps in different registers with splendid, noble, honorable, decent, ethical, fine, and even beautiful. In the context of bravery, noble is a good translation, given the enormous risk involved in the actions Aristotle counts as brave. In the context of other virtues, decent is often a better fit. The translation varies accordingly. Continuing. While not everyone is frightened by the same things, we hold that some things are too much for a human and will frighten anyone with sense. Other things are more and less frightening to different people, and the same goes for things that embolden us. Bravery is a matter of being as undaunted as a human can be. Brave people will be frightened by such things, but in the right way, and they will endure them as thinking dictates. Their aim is to do what is noble, since that is the goal of virtue. It is possible to be more and less frightened by frightening things, and also to be frightened by things that are not frightening, as if they were. People who endure and are frightened by the right things and for the right reasons, as well as in the manner and at the right times, and likewise for what emboldens them, those people are brave. A brave person's suffering and action is worthwhile. It is what thinking would command. As for the extremes, there is no name for the overly fearless person. As we mentioned above, many of these characters are nameless. But you would be mad or incapable of feeling if you were frightened at nothing, not even at earthquakes or raging waves, as people say about the Celts. Someone who is excessively emboldened in the face of frightening things is rash, and seems to be a braggart as well, pretending to be brave. They want it to look as if they face frightening things the way the brave do, and so they imitate them as far as they can, which in fact makes most of them rash cowards, since they fail to withstand the frightening things that their boldness leads them to face. The excessively frightened person is a coward, frightened by the wrong things or in the wrong way, and so forth. They also fall short in boldness, but they are more conspicuous in having excessive pains. A coward lacks confidence and is frightened by everything. A brave person is the opposite, because being bold makes you confident. And it actually continues from where I started at the beginning. It's a cool little loop. It actually didn't seem to be too incongruent. What say you? Oh, look at that. The next section here is actually called Food, Drink, and Sex. I think I'm going to make that a title all on its own. From Virtue and Vice in Action, which it starts, it says, in Chapter 9, Aristotle concludes his account of bravery with a discussion of the pleasures and pains involved in brave action. And then we have Food, Drink, and Sex. That's a good title and a good time to shut this down and start another one so that I can have another little piece of content for my podcast. So that's it. This was Bold and Brave, or Cowardly and Conforming. Should put a question mark there, shouldn't I? Cowardly and Conforming. There we go. Yes, you've been listening to Bold and Brave, or Cowardly and Conforming, presented by Hakeem Alibokas Alexander on Spreaker Social Podcasting and Wisdom Social Audio Inc., presented for World Reading Club in association with exercisingyourmind.com and UniquilibriuM. This edition's reading focus has come to us from How to Flourish, Aristotle, an ancient guide to living well. And the section read from, which I'll continue in just a few moments, is called Virtue and Vice in Action. Virtue and Vice in Action. Books 3, 4, and 5.